Hi, I'm Nicholas McGurr, author of The Afterlife and host for Stories in a Cemetery. You can find all my fiction works with themes of the afterlife on nicholasmcgurr.com. That's NicholasMcGirr.com. As a writer, I do research, and that research is more than likely inside a haunted location or a cemetery. Like you, I'm curious about the afterlife, and always looking for a new topic for my next book. I hope you enjoy this episode of my research as much as I did in using it for my fiction works. Let's get into today's story in the cemetery. Well, hello everybody. This is Nicholas McGurr. You can call me Nick. I am the author of The Afterlife. So here we are on episode 4. Thank you so much for coming back to listen to another story in the cemetery. I hope you've been enjoying the podcast so far. I love doing them, and I want to make sure you guys love and enjoying them on your end of things. So please leave comments after each show. Tell me about your experiences. You can always find me on Facebook. You can leave me stories there, or you can leave messages right here on my host on Anchor. If you are on iTunes, please go ahead and leave a review of what you think of the podcast so far. Guys, that only does wonders for getting more people to listen, and I will not be able to thank you enough for leaving those reviews for me. So, guys, a couple of things tonight before we get into the actual story that we're going to really dive into. I'm super excited to get into it. But a couple things. This past weekend, I did happen to go to another cemetery. And I randomly visit cemeteries. I know it's weird. You may think it's weird. You might do it yourself. Who knows? But I decided I was going to go over to the Somerville Cemetery. So I live in Somerville, South Carolina. And I thought it would be really cool to go check this one out. I looked up any kind of haunted story based on the cemetery. And, you know, what I've read wasn't much on it, to be honest with you, but it was enough for me to say, I'll go check it out. So I did. And some of the stories say that you can smell smoke, when you're in the older part of the cemetery, or there'll be cold spots around some of the older headstones. And what I will tell you is it's exactly what I found. So it wasn't anything that I smelled smoke. If any, the funny thing is all I could smell was horse manure, because it looked like there was some kind of horse farm next door to the cemetery. But I will tell you for certain that there were cold spots. Now, granted, it is March, and it is still a little chilly here in South Carolina, but this was not the wind. When there were cold spots, it was literally one side of my body had chills, the other side was perfectly warm. And it wasn't because I had one sleeve up and one sleeve down. I would turn my body to kind of test the theory and give it a few seconds, and it was definitely a cold spot. So, again, very interesting. I may dive into it more, may actually call a psychic friend or two just to come investigate with me. But for right now, it was a fun experience. Needed something to do over the weekend, so if you get a chance to check it out, or if you've been to the Somerville Cemetery in South Carolina and you have a story or something a little bit more in depth, by all means, feel free to leave it in the notes or find me on Facebook under Nicholas McGurr Author. So that story aside, that was kind of short. That's not really an episode. We're barely 3 minutes in. So I do have a couple of free books this week, guys. So The Life Tree and The Umbrella Tree. Go ahead and go look it up on Amazon. They're free downloads this week. They are part of my novelette series that you can find the entire series of all 3 books on Amazon. They're normally only 99 cents, but I thought, let's give away some free books this week and let's see what happens. Let's gain some new fans. So if you're listening, go ahead and pause. And we're back. So hopefully that 3-second was plenty for you to go and look that up on Amazon, and you've already downloaded The Life Tree and you wanted to hear another spooky story. So at any rate, here we go into tonight's story. We are looking at Brentwood Restaurant. So this is a very, very haunted location, perhaps, and has been said on more than one occasion, the most haunted location along the Grand Strand. Now, when I did this investigation, it was in 2012, just like all the other things that I was going to use for my unpublished book. And if you haven't been listening or you're a first-time listener, thank you for joining. But you should know that I was working on a on a book, nonfiction, that would prove a psychic's abilities. So I understand last week I did not give one of those stories. I don't have many, so I'm kind of trying to space them out a little bit so that way you guys get a little bit of everything on some of the research that I do for my books and some of the things that I just like to do for fun. And looking for ghosts and diving into things unknown is what's fun to me. So if you're listening, I'm sure it's fun for you too. But the Brentwood Restaurant, again, said to be the most haunted location along the Grand Strand. If you're not sure what the Grand Strand is, that's the entire Atlantic coast of South Carolina. So from the tip, usually all the way down into the like Hilton Head area. And what's funny about this is that the Brentwood Restaurant is actually in Little River, so pretty close to North Carolina. So the gist of the book was very simple. I teamed up with a psychic. He'll remain unnamed through these podcasts and through my blog. And if you want to read the full story of the Brentwood Restaurant and every other podcast, all of the lengthy show notes are in my blog on my website. That's at nicholasmcgirr.com, nicholasmcgirr.com. But at the same time, this was one of those things where I picked him up and he immediately started picking up some vibes. Now, I never told him where we were going to be going. I never told him anything other than how to dress because we were going to be outside. We were going to visit an old cemetery, or if we were going to be inside, and basically how long we were going to be gone. So this way, we are both unbiased, and I didn't do a whole lot of research other than, hey, this is a haunted location. So with the psychic, when I picked him up, he immediately started going into his automatic writings, and you could see those pictures on my blog. But I do want to start at the beginning of this story because it is an awesome one. I am going to read the chapter of what I had so far. Now, I never finished it, and I probably should go back and finish it, but I do explain a lot of these things in the blog piece. So if you get a chance, go back and read it. But I'm going to read the chapter and probably stop in between, and I'm sure you'll hear the change in my voice. There's always a difference in a reading voice and in a talking voice. So guys, I don't usually plan these whole things out. Like, I take a couple of notes, but I want them to be natural, so that way it feels like you're having a conversation with me. And well, Byron too, because Byron is always with me when I do these podcast episodes. And Byron, if you don't know, is my adorable dapple dachshund who obviously has a book, but we won't talk about that tonight. So going back into the Brentwood Restaurant, let's get started, because this is an awesome story, and there's a lot of really cool stuff in here, and I really want to hear you guys' thoughts on some of this stuff. So make sure you guys leave me some notes and comments after the show, after you've listened. So the history. The Brentwood Restaurant, owned by Chef Eric Masson, hopefully I'm pronouncing that properly, and wife Kimberly, has exchanged hands several times over the past century. The current use, a French cuisine bistro, is lovely from both the outside and inside decor. Covered in wine corks and old pictures collected by the Massons along the East Coast, the restaurant has claims of paranormal activity that simply couldn't be ignored when I was researching for new places to visit with psychic. So I use the term psychic and photographer as titles, as names, to hide the identities of my team that was with me at the time. Paranormal investigators have long been trying to get into the Brentwood, begging to have a sleepover session filled with moving objects and whispers in their ears. There has been one noted investigator, Stephen Lancaster, that started the hype around this location, dubbing the Brentwood as the most haunted location along the Grand Strand. Though this is quite possibly true, during our investigation there were no strange voices, or objects moving, or even doors slamming for that matter. No, what we found was a remarkable way to truly prove psychic's psychic abilities and allow him to wander through the house turned restaurant freely. So the next section talks about the equipment. I don't think you guys care about the equipment. Just know that I used a voice recorder because psychic talks really, really fast, and I needed something to be able to go back and listen to and possibly catch EVPs if we were lucky. If you listened to my show 2 weeks ago, Hatcher Cemetery, you can actually hear one of those recordings because it was relevant to the story. I'm going to skip over the equipment used piece. Again, some of that stuff can be boring, and if you don't know cameras and that kind of thing, it's not that big of a deal. So before our trip, just like all trips, minimal research was done on this house prior to the trip. This keeps me unbiased, and other than the claim of being haunted, I did absolutely no research on previous owners, to haunting claims, etc. Psychic, as always, was unable to do any research due to the lack of research materials and technology. He was completely blind coming to this case, other than knowing that it has haunting claims. So the car ride. Now, this is where you get to see the crazy pictures of the automatic writing from the psychic. So there's a lot of cool stuff in this, and we're going to talk about a lot of it. So on the car ride over to the Brentwood, Psychic chose to sit in the back seat to begin tapping into whatever spirit or spirits may want to come through during our visit. While meditating in my back seat, he came up with this sketch of automatic writing. Please see the blog. Of course, none of us, Psychic, the photographer, or myself, knew what any of it could possibly mean, but the same initials reference EM and repetitive numbers would prove truth later. If you notice in the top left corner of the letter S in between the initials, this was our first clue as to what we would be dealing with. The letters C and P are also written below the initials. These would also prove Psychic's abilities through research. Other clues that came about were, quote-unquote, moved, quote, my ending equals your start, recognition, I feel lucky. All of these would have significance on this case, and Kim was able to validate quite a bit for us after the tour. So I'm going to read those again because they all have relevance. Moved, my ending equals your start, recognition, I feel lucky. In addition, take note that fish is okay for breakfast is written on Psychic's sketchpad. Wow, that's a tongue twister there. Psychic's sketchpad. This statement not only brought some light to the previous owner, but also gave some insight into who is coming through to Psychic. So let's get into the initials, because the initials are super cool. Like we talked about the letters EM. So upon reaching the house, Psychic felt a need to go to a bedroom on one of the upper floors. He was drawn to it as we walked closer to the house. After introductions with Chef Eric and his wife, we made our way to this bedroom. Kim decided to stay with us for the tour, but promised not to reveal anything until we were finished. Since Psychic was starting to say what he was feeling, the moment we entered the house, I got the feeling that Kim was going to have a difficult time not revealing anything until after the tour. Psychic spoke of the initials piece right from the start, claiming that whoever was coming through to him had the same initials as Chef Eric. Keep in mind, Psychic and Chef Eric have never even met. They didn't know each other's names. They didn't know any of that stuff. Psychic had no idea the last name of the couple who currently own the house, and definitely did not know about the previous owners. Chef Eric Masson's initials, EM, proved to match that of the previous owner, Essie McCorsley. Guys, I can't tell you, during that time, I can still remember it. I had chills. It was crazy. Psychic was really, really good. So, moving on. Other initials or letters came through Psychic's automatic writing. The letter C we found was a reference to Essie's husband, Clarence. On Psychic's sketchpad, there was also a note that reads, always watching, with an arrow pointed to the sea. Psychic believes that though Clarence was silent through our tour, he was and is always watching over the business that have taken over the home since his death. Also written is the letter P, and Psychic's instinct tells him that Essie did not get along with this P person. Kim was able to validate that a Mary Platt took over the home after the McCorsleys, and the two did not exactly get along. This information came from a descendant of the McCorsleys. Of course, they told that to Kim, not us. Now, this is where everything starts to get a little creepier. So there's a lot of repetitive numbers. So we're going to start getting into that, and you can validate some of this research because some of it actually marks some of the history around the home. Psychic also notated the repetition of numbers from the start. When asked which numbers were repeating, he claimed to hear the numbers 15 and 17. Though I could not find the relevance to the number 17, the number 15 proved to serve several dates in later research. This was one clue to add to another. No pun intended. Essie McCorsley's death on October 15th also marks the date of the closing of the sale of the Brentwood Restaurant for the Massons. My ending equals your start was written in the first sketch of automatic writing done by Psychic. This writing done by Psychic now made sense. Wait, there's more to the 15 number. During the investigation, Psychic felt the need to stand by the front door as Kim was just about to show us underneath the stairwell where the Brentwood computer is kept. Psychic felt someone collecting quote-unquote dollars at this front door, and then heard the whisper 1954, 1954. Psychic went on to explain that in 1954, the person collecting dollars did not collect any money. At the time, we had no idea what he was talking about. What we found out is that Hurricane Hazel came through Little River, South Carolina, the location of the Brentwood, on October 15th, 1954. This was not only another repetitive 15, but could also mean that Essie was not charging people to come into her home for protection from the storm. Although there is no written evidence that Essie took people in from Hazel, it was too ironic that underneath the stairs was a focus when Psychic heard the whisper. Could the passage underneath the stairs have been a storm barricade that Essie used to protect her neighbors from the hurricane? I have no evidence that says this didn't happen. Crazy stuff, I know. I can't tell you how much this investigation was. It was so much fun, guys. I can't even tell you. There was a lot of stuff that came out. So we're going to move on because there's more clues. Lucky recognition. Recognition, quote unquote, and I feel lucky, quote unquote, is written on Psychic sketchpad. There it is again, that crazy tongue twister. And these two phrases had no meaning to us on our way to the Brentwood. We pulled into the Brentwood's parking area to find that the actual street name is Luck Street. Although the Brentwood's current location is not the original, we still felt there was a connection here. The recognition, written, Psychic felt as though it was a gracious recognition, as if Essie was saying, thank you for the recognition. Again, we had no clue what Psychic was referring to until we asked him about it later. She remembered while pointing out the original location of the house that there are two streets just a bit down the road from the original location named after Essie. Those two streets form a crossroads of each other and are named McCorsley and Besant. Kim explained that Besant was Essie's maiden name. There's a picture of this crossroads with the two street signs on my blog, so make sure you check that out. This not only proved the recognition writing, but also the moved that Psychic felt the urge to write twice. So, guys, there was way more to the story, and that was actually kind of the end of what I had written thus far. This was our last investigation that we were working on. But with something else I wanted to point out with the whole lucky piece, even though, I mean, granted, Luck Street and I feel lucky before we even got there was a big deal. There were, when we first met up with Kimberly, we were in a front room of the house, and, we kind of explained, how we were going to go about our process, the equipment we were using, that we were going to take pictures and got their permission and that kind of thing. And then we met up in that room again to kind of go over the notes and to kind of get some of the explanations from Kim. What we noticed was that the entire ceiling above the Psychic's head was covered in ladybugs. Totally weird, totally random. It was just one of those things like, what in the world is going on this bright white ceiling with all these little black dots? And as we get closer, we noticed that they were ladybugs. Ladybugs are a symbol of luck in a lot of different cultures. And I don't have those notes in front of me, but I do remember that distinctly, that there were ladybugs, covering that ceiling. And what's even weirder is that when I tried to upload those pictures into the blog, they would not upload. So I don't know what the reason is for that. I'm not going to dive too much into it. I believe everything kind of happens for a reason, and that's just, I wasn't meant to put those pictures up there. They're probably too hard to see, or Essie was watching over me going, nope, those are my ladybugs. I'm going to hang on to them. You can't show them to the world. But guys, the Brentwood Restaurant was super cool. There was a lot of other claims to the home where the dumbwaiter would move, and some of the things in the kitchen would slam around and things like that. And we didn't experience any of that. None of that happened. We toured the Brentwood Restaurant during the daytime. That was kind of one of our things is we weren't looking to go and to do, some of like these TV shows with the sleepovers and the lockdowns and that kind of thing. My book was meant to prove a psychic's ability. I just needed haunted locations to do that. So I wasn't using crazy infrared cameras and things like that, and wanting to perform seances and shout out into the room, if anybody can hear me, please move something. And granted, I've done those things with spirit boards, but the premise of the book was not about any of those extra ritualistic type things. It was more about getting the psychic to be believed. I wanted to prove that with haunted locations, that psychics are fully great resources for guys like me that write fiction stories, and how we go about doing some of our research. Not only did it help me learn how to research more in depth, but the psychic taught me quite a bit about emotion and the way people pass on, and spirituality. Like, there was a lot of lessons learned in there. But with the Brentwood Restaurant, with it being one of the most haunted locations along the Grand Strand, I felt like it was a golden opportunity for us to get in there, dig around a little bit and see what he came up with. And one thing, I mentioned this earlier, and I kind of chuckled, but I never explained it in the chapter, was fish is okay for breakfast. And we all had a good laugh when Psychic said this. And it was later revealed to us that because the Brentwood Restaurant was so close, to the rivers and where fishermen would go, a lot of people would pass by or come down from North Carolina, just to go fishing in the waters in that area, and they would end up staying in town. Well, Essie's house would essentially be somewhere that they would stay, and they, in order to pay for their room, they brought food that Essie would cook for them. And well, what's a fisherman going to bring? He's going to bring fish. So fish was okay for breakfast. And we all kind of had a really good chuckle about that. And it just made perfect sense at that point. Like, once I did some research and proved, the story that Kim told us, it made sense. It made perfect sense. Obviously, the Massons had done a lot of research themselves. They even contacted me. It was about a year after we did this investigation, asking about when the book was going to be released and things like that. And I just couldn't get enough locations of people allowing us to come in and do what we do, to investigate and for me to get the research I needed to finish writing this book. So I'm publishing it now through my blog posts and obviously through this podcast. And guys, I still can't thank you enough. This is a super cool story. I had a lot of fun investigating this place. I hope that one day, Kimberly and Eric get a chance to hear this podcast and see the pictures that, I took of their gorgeous restaurant. And there was so many coincidences when I wrote this and when we did the investigation, that it wasn't something that I should have finished it, but it wasn't something I needed to write it down right away because there was so much. I still have the recordings, but there was nothing of relevance other than for my own research. So my apologies for not having any bonus material like I did a couple weeks ago with the Hatcher Cemetery episode. But if you want to hear that, and if you haven't, go back to episode 2, and I added a little bonus in there. But guys, I can't thank you enough for listening. This is becoming such a fun thing for me, to where I can actually tell stories and talk about the investigations and the research that I do for my books. And that's half the fun for me. Don't get me wrong. I love writing, but researching some of these topics, and I'm going to start getting more into with some later episodes, some of the topics that I'm researching. So I have a lot of different things coming up, things like Atlantis, the Bermuda Triangle. Those two are going to be tied together like they usually are. So if you know anything about either one, you usually can't get one without the other. I have a dystopian type feel book coming up. That one's probably a little bit further down the road. The third installment of my Crossman McKnight series deals with ambitheism, and that's the Greek mythology underworld. Guys, I have tons and tons of ideas, and the research is all the fun of it. So with Greek mythology's underworld, that's so much fun. So if you love Greek mythology and you like seeing it put in modern day times, please check out my Crossman McKnight series. It's called Growing Dim. You can find all of that stuff on Amazon. But again, guys, this particular trip to Brentwood Restaurant has inspired me to continue going. I have still visited cemeteries and other places where I just get a weird feeling, or I say this kind of feels like this place, or this felt like that place. And the Brentwood Restaurant comes up a lot just because of some of the things that, kind of happened there, and the chills that it gave while we were there with Psychic doing his thing. It was pretty awesome. So I visited many other cemeteries. Who knows? I might actually start revisiting them, so that way I can continue telling you some of those stories in the cemetery. Ironic on the title of the show. So again, I cannot thank you enough for listening. Huge, huge deal that you're still here. This podcast can only grow with you liking and sharing it. I am going to start a Facebook page for this, probably in the next week or so. So hopefully by the next episode, you will have a Facebook or Facebook group to collaborate with the other fans of the show. And maybe a couple of links here and there from my books will pop in. But again, if you haven't checked out my works yet, they're all on Amazon. And guys, hopefully you all become super fans. I'm super fans of you. And what this show is meant to do is to get you to open up your mind a little bit. And it's okay to question things. It's okay to be curious about things that we don't know about. That's why I do this. I'm curious and eager to learn more about the things that we don't know about. And that's why I go after the afterlife so much. And it's the one thing on this earth that we really can't prove. At least we haven't yet. We've got little bits here and there and some belief systems and some religions that tell us, different things. But the whole point of me getting on the air like this is to talk about things and to be honest with myself that I'm curious. I want to know. I mean, I don't want to be on the other side to know, but I want to know what it is that's out there. What's on that other side? Are these ghosts and the things that we talk about and we're curious about, are they real? Have you experienced something like that proves otherwise? Do you have a near-death experience, an out-of-body experience? All of these things that come up with the supernatural or, those kind of abilities. I want to know about them. These are things that I write about. They make great stories. If you've had these kind of things, let me know. We might even do an interview. We'll put you on the air and you could tell us your story and what you felt during any type of these things. And maybe you visited a couple cemeteries yourself. You're a paranormal investigator. Great. I want to hear more. So I've worked with investigator teams in the past, just kind of swapping stories and getting some data down and kind of seeing what came out of a specific location. It's fun. There was no competition. We were all in it together. I was the writer / researcher, and I had information that they didn't have, and vice versa. So it was really cool stuff when I got to do that. So I'd love to talk to you. If you're part of a team or if you're doing stuff down here in the South Carolina area, I'd like to meet you. Maybe we can get together, have coffee, go find a haunted location and go investigate together. I think that'd be pretty awesome. But anyway, guys, again, I cannot thank you enough for listening. Make sure you share, like the show, share it with your friends, do whatever you got to do. But make sure you keep listening. I'm going to do better at getting consistent week to week. And I will see you guys on the next episode. Thanks again, guys. You are awesome. Thanks so much for listening to today's Story in a Cemetery. Be sure to check out the show notes with pictures and bonus audio sections on nicholasmcgurr.com. As you know, I'm a writer, and now you have another story that inspires me to write my fiction works. Be sure to share this episode on your social media or leave me comments on the Stories in the Cemetery Facebook page. I'll see you next time with another Story in the Cemetery.